You all see the screen? Or what do you see?
Yes.
Yes.
The banner?
I don't see anything. There it goes.
Do you see the banner? Or what do you
I
Yes.
see?
do now, yeah.
Okay.
It looks like you're viewing it in PowerPoint though, not like the PowerPoint itself.
There.
There it is.
How about now? Okay, so that's good. All right. Let me let in the participants. And,
Did you start the recording?
I'm about to, it keeps clicking off.
Zoom is not the friend today.
At all. All right, now I got it. We got more that are coming in. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's A Month of Service presentation of property taxes, exemptions, and protest exemptions and payment options. My name is Nia Murray. I am the programs coordinator with Neighborhood Recovery Community Development Corporation, and we are one of the partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Also included, we have the City of Houston's Department of Neighborhoods, the Harris Central Appraisal District, and on behalf of the Appraisal District today, we have Ms. Tawana Nelson and Ms. Sarah Hatch, who will be providing you all with the information. In addition to that, we also have Ms. Shay Pinkowski with our presenting partner with the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector's Office. But we also have the Earl Carl Institute, Houston Volunteer Lawyers, Texas Legal Services Center, Lone Star Legal Aid, and the Harris County Attorney's Office, who are all partners in the A Month of Service collaboration. Now, the month of service collaboration is the collective of all of our organizations coming together on a now every other month to offer a variety of different workshops and resources and information to the community relative to asset building, asset protection, the maintaining of generational wealth, and community empowerment. Our collaboration started several years ago in an effort to try to create a larger impact and reach as many community members as we possibly can to provide them with the most up-to-date, the most accurate information available to them related to those particular areas that I had mentioned. We know that there are a lot of resources that are available that are out there that a lot of folks in the communities just don't have access to, and they don't know where to go for those available resources, don't know where to go when they need to get their basic questions answered. And with the fact that this is now protest season that's coming up, majority of you hopefully should have received your valuation notices, and you need information about the appraisal or the valuation process, the exemptions, protesting the property taxes, your payment options if you haven't paid your property tax bill as of yet. And we're here to provide you with that information once again, and also to help with dispelling the myths of a lot of misinformation that's out there. We know that a lot of folks rely on various resources for information, i.e., internet, social media, TikTok, all of that kinds of stuff, where you have these pseudo experts that are out there to tell you things that not necessarily related to Harris County or the state of Texas. So we're here to make sure that we give you again, the most accurate and up-to-date information that's available to you. So with that being said, this is your opportunity to ask questions of the professionals with the appraisal district and the tax assessor's office so that you can get those questions addressed. However, we are on a public platform. We do broadcast live from our social media page. We do record this session. We do send it out to everybody that has registered to attend the event for today. So we want to try to protect your privacy as best as we possibly can. So we do ask that you try to keep your questions as general as you can. There will be people monitoring the chat. We will be answering and re-asking the questions aloud at the end of the presentation so that everybody can kind of hear the same uh, answers to the questions that you may have had. but we do try to ask that you keep them, again, as general as you possibly can so that your personal detail information is not getting out there for everybody to have access to. So don't give us information or type information into the chat, because the chat will be included in the recording as well, you know, with your address, your subdivision, you know, where you live, you're married to this person, so and so just passed away or whatever. Please don't give us any of that detailed information. However, we do encourage you to reach out if you do have something specific in nature, to reach out, and they'll give you the contact information of where to send that information to, or those particular kinds of questions that you may have. So we don't want your issue to not be addressed, but we're going to try to, you know, keep it, again, as general as we possibly can. But you have the opportunity to type your question into the chat. And again, someone will answer the question for you. You can wait until the end. You can unmute yourself, raise your hand, you know, say it aloud, whatever's more comfortable for you. If you are joining us on our social media channels, I am monitoring the comment section, so please feel free to type your question into the comment section as well, so that that can be addressed at the end of the presentation as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to have Ms. Shay Pinkowski with the Harris County Tax Office introduce herself first, and then Sarah and Tawana will have you guys introduce, and that way you can move right on into your presentation. So without further ado, Ms. Shay.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm with the Office of Miss Annette Ramirez, the Harris County Tax Assessor Collector. Just brief introduction, I manage the customer service department, and I'm here to help answer some questions, as well as give some information. I am aware that my camera is lagging, so I might turn that off just because I think it's a little distracting. But I'm here to help and assist, and I hope to be able to answer some questions today. So thank you for your attention, thank you for your time, and I look forward to it.
Okay, Ms. Tawana and Sarah.
Hi, my name is Tawana Nelson. I'm with the Harris Central Appraisal District. I'm an exemption specialist. If you have any questions or concerns, of course, you'll place them in the chat. If you have other questions, then we'll answer them at the end also. But at any rate, welcome to the chat.
Hi, and I'm Sarah Hatch. I'm one of the valuation analysts for residential property at Harris Central Appraisal District. I'll be doing the first part of our presentation today, and then I'll let Tawana talk a little bit about exemptions. And we do also have a couple of additional staff members of ours monitoring the chat as well. So if you've got questions while the presentation is going on, feel free to put them in there. Hopefully a lot of them will be answered by the presentation itself.
Can you let us know who's in the chat? Who do we have in the chat so I can notate them so people will know?
We have Miss Jamie Stanley and Mr. Joseph Carr in the chat.
Okay. All righty.
And let me get my screen going. All right, can you all see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so we're going to be talking about property taxes, protesting, and exemptions. And there we go. All right, so the reason that we do this is for the purpose of property taxes. Those property taxes are important. They support our critical local services. Texas has no state income tax, and so in order to support those critical services, we have property taxes, and the local taxing units will use the tax revenue that they derive from those property taxes to provide things such as service to our streets and roads, to our schools, and to our first responders. There are over 600 different taxing entities in Harris County. So the school districts are kind of the biggest ones, and then we also have mud districts and the cities themselves, and just like I said, over 600 different taxing entities. And so you'll have several that have jurisdiction over any given property. All of this is governed by the Texas State Legislature. That's where all the property tax laws originate. And there is oversight over the whole process by the Texas Comptroller's Office in the Property Tax Assistance Division. So the role of Central Appraisal Districts includes primarily that we are determining the values for the properties. So we appraise all county property, whether that's residential, so your home, commercial for businesses, agricultural properties, industrial properties, and business personal property. So all those different types of property, we have a responsibility to value each year at 100% of market value as of January 1st of each year. And all of that comes straight from the state tax code. Another primary role of the appraisal district is to administer exemptions, also to certify the appraisal rolls. So once we've appraised the properties and gone through the protest process, and we certify those rolls and we hand them over to the taxing jurisdictions to be able to set their rates accordingly and generate the tax bills. The reason that the central appraisal districts exist is to have one centralized method of valuation for the properties. It keeps the system fair. It keeps you from having one value for the ISD and a different value for the MUD district and so on. So it keeps everything consistent. And it's overseen locally by the chief appraiser, as well as a 9-member administrative board of directors. So talking about our appraisals, again, we're required by the tax code to be at 100% of market value. This means that when we're looking at sales and we're determining the values for a given neighborhood, we need to be valuing based on 100% of the market value of the sales that occurred in that area. And we have oversight over this. The state conducts property value studies of the central appraisal districts to ensure we're in compliance. So every 2 years, they will conduct a study to determine whether we are within a reasonable range of 100% of market value based on the sales that occurred. Our values are conducted by the process of mass appraisal. So we're not looking at each individual property and determining a value just for that property in isolation. We're valuing properties in mass. And so we're valuing typically whole neighborhoods at a time based on the market activity in that neighborhood. So again, that value derived is based on sales. That's our number one indicator of market value for the properties. So Harris Central Appraisal District is responsible for 1.9 million parcels, parcels meaning individual properties, and we're serving over 500 taxing jurisdictions in Harris County. So this is an example of what your notice of appraisal, your annual value notice would look like. This will have your appraised value, which is the number used in calculating your tax bill. This may be the same as your market value, or it may be lower because of a 10% appraisal cap for properties with homestead exemptions. So we'll have the appraised value, which is like I said, the number used in calculating your tax bill. It will also have the market value. This is that 100% market value, the value at which we estimate that the property would sell for to a willing buyer on the open market. So on the left side of my presentation here is where you'll see kind of the example of what one of those value notices looks like. You see the appraised value first up there, and then the market value below it. You'll also note I have a highlighted portion here up on the top right portion of the page is where you'll find what's called an iFile number. It's a very important number for you to have and to keep for your records. It helps you with filing your protest, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But that's where that number can be found, is on the top right portion of your value notice. And then the protests are based on the market value that's listed on this notice. So while your appraised value is what the tax bill is based on, what we are determining is your full market value. And when you come into protest, that's what we're talking about, is your full market value. So here is another sample of that value notice. Again, up there on the top right is where you'll find an iFile number. We've got kind of an arrow pointing to it. This number is what you can use on our website in order to file a protest. So you can conveniently file a protest online at www.hcad.org/iFile. That's where you can use that iFile number to sort of create a portal for yourself and file your protest. And once again, those protests are based on that second number, the market value. And so this is a sample of what the second page of your value notice will look like, and it has some additional helpful information. It includes land and improvement value. So what that means is, on the first page, you have your overall market value. On the second page, you'll see kind of how that's broken out into the value that we attribute to the land that your property has, and then the value of any improvements on your property. Now, when we say improvements, we're not talking about, home improvement. We're not talking about remodels or renovations. When we say improvements, we mean anything that is over and above just the land that's on your property. So any buildings, any additional features that you've added to just that empty lot. This second page will also include your previous year's appraised value. So you can kind of compare that to this year's appraised value. It will also include a list of your specific taxing jurisdictions. So on this example here, we show Houston ISD, the county, the flood control district, Port of Houston Authority. So you'll have several different taxing jurisdictions that have jurisdiction over your property, and that's where you'll find the list of them. You'll also find information on any current exemptions that are applied to your property on this second page of your notice. So what determines your property value? Lots of things go into determining value for the properties. Again, we're doing mass appraisal, typically by neighborhood. We have approximately 7,000 neighborhoods in Harris County. And so we look at those neighborhoods. We also gather information to the best of our ability, to the best of our knowledge about the condition of your property. We look at recent sales, whether it's a purchase or sale of your home itself, or whether it's other comparable sales in your area. And then we also look at what amenities are on the properties and compare those to one another. And all of these are things that can be that can go into our valuation. They're also all things that you can consider and bring as evidence to your protest. So if you have information that we may not have about the condition of your property, or of comparable sales in the area that we may not have on record, or things of that nature, those are information that we can look at during your protest. And ultimately, you're the expert on your individual home. No one knows your home like you do. We do our best to gather information, but again, we have 1.9 million properties in Harris County to value, and we're valuing those in mass. And so we're not going to know the details of every individual home. So you know the details of your home, and you can bring that information in. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your right to file a protest and some questions to consider when protesting. Again, we're looking at the market value. So this is going to be the primary thing that you would be protesting, is your market value. And the question to ask there is your value consistent with recent property sales in your area? So is your value on your home, does it look like the sale prices of the homes that have been selling in your area? Another thing to look at is equity. And the thing to ask there, we want to make sure that we are noticing properties fairly and equitably compared to one another. And so are there similar homes in your neighborhood or in a similar neighborhood that are valued pretty much the same as yours? That's what we want to do when we're treating things fairly and equitably. If your home looks a lot like several other homes in your neighborhood, they should all be valued similarly. Another question is, do you have issues such as deferred maintenance or hidden defects that may affect your home's value? So again, when we're comparing your home to other homes in the neighborhood, and to us, they seem similar, but maybe you know of something going on with the condition of your home that's unique, that doesn't look like your neighbors, and that may impact your home's market value. So some evidence for you to collect for your protest would be comparable sales info. Texas is a non-disclosure state, and what that means is that when a sale occurs, we are not automatically notified of that. We gather that information the best that we can, but there may be sales that you know occurred in your neighborhood that we don't have record of. And so if you have record of sales that that you don't think we may have record of, then that's information that you could provide during your protest. Again, hidden defects of your home or other condition issues that are going on there, or repairs that are needed. If you do have repairs that are needed, it's very helpful for us to have photos of the condition of your home, as well as estimates for the cost of repair. Now, ideally, both photos and estimates are something that we want to be pretty up to date. And so we'd like to know, again, we're valuing each year as of the condition of your home on January 1st of that year. So this year, when you're protesting, everything about it is going to be the condition of your home as of January 1st of 2026. And so if you have condition issues that were present as of January 1st of this year, and you want to bring in photos and estimates regarding those needed repairs, we'd like to see them be pretty current or pretty close to that January 1st valuation date. So if you have photos, it's always really helpful if you have a date stamp on them to show that they're current. And same with repair estimates. If you've got an estimate from a contractor, it's good if we can see on the date there that it's a current estimate. All right, so some different methods and types of protests. There is a paper form that you can fill out and mail into the district, or to submit electronically. It's also, we've tried to make it very convenient to file online with that iFile system. When you do file online, you have the option of opting into the iSettle program. This kind of takes the place of coming into our office for an informal hearing. You can opt into iSettle, and if we're able to make an offer, an electronic offer to you via email through that program, then that takes the place of an informal hearing, and you have the option to either accept that offer or to then go to a formal hearing. If you don't opt into that iSettle program, or we're not able to make an electronic offer through that program, you can come to what is called an informal hearing. So this can be done either virtually on online, or it can be done in person with someone from the HCAD staff. And that is just a one-on-one between you and part of our appraisal staff to discuss any evidence you have for your home, for your protest, and see if we can come to an agreement of an appropriate market value at that level. If so, then that's great, and you're done with your protest process for the year. And if not, again, that can go to the next step, which will be a formal hearing. So if you're not able to settle either via the iSettle program or the informal hearing process, then you go to a formal hearing, which again can be done virtually via a program called WebEx, or it can be done in person in our office with an appraisal review board. So this is a separate panel. They're separate and distinct from HCAD, and they consider between Harris County, Harris Central Appraisal District and your protest, and they come to a determination of value. So that can either be a 3-member panel of appraisal review board members, or it can be just one single member who listens to that case and makes a determination. There are additional methods beyond that formal hearing. If you're still not satisfied with the outcome of that, there are additional methods, including arbitration and litigation, but those do typically have some fees involved in filing those. All right, so reviewing our evidence. Once you have filed your protest, our evidence is provided to you at least 14 days prior to a scheduled hearing. So once you filed your protest and received notice of the date and time for your hearing, and at least 14 days prior to that, our entire evidence package will be available to you to access and to review. It includes sales that are in your immediate neighborhood. It includes sales from surrounding neighborhoods. It includes interactive maps that help put those sales into perspective, and some additional points of important property data. So it also includes the information that we have about your property, the sketch that we have of it, things of that nature. So there's a lot of information in our evidence packs that you can access 2 weeks prior to your hearing and go over it, review it, and you can take a look and see if the comparable sales that we're using to compare to your property are appropriate, or see if there are other sales that you know of that we don't have in our evidence. So one thing that's important to know about our evidence packs is that because of state confidentiality laws, this information can only be disclosed after a protest is filed. This is not something that we're able to provide to you before in order to help you decide whether to file a protest. This is only available after you've filed a protest because it's confidential up until that point. So if you are interested to know what evidence we have to support our value of your property, and you want to see what sales we have access to and what we're using to compare, you'll need to file a protest in order to see that evidence. All right, so some tips on preparing for your protest. You've taken a look at what we've assessed you at and reviewed it. You've gathered your own comparable properties, whether of sales, or whether that's equity comparisons. If you say, hey, there are properties that look like mine in my neighborhood, but I'm valued differently, and you want to take a look at those. Any documented issues with your property, like we've talked about, and again, supported with photos and with estimates. Those are all very helpful to us in determining how best to account for that, for your value. Make sure that you've filed your protest on time. The deadline to file a protest is typically May 15th, or 30 days after the date on the notice of value that was sent to you, whichever is later. Let's see, also, once you've filed and you've gathered all that evidence, you have had the opportunity to go to an informal meeting. And if you've been able to settle there, awesome. If not, you can go to that formal ARB hearing. And again, we kind of have this in here multiple times of a reminder that your protest is based on the market value, not the appraised value. That's because that appraised value, again, it takes into account the exemptions that are on the property. You may have had an exemption on your property for, only 3 years, where your neighbor may have had an exemption on their property for 15 years. And so their cap on their property may be very different from yours based on a number of factors. And so we can't really compare equity of the appraised value. We're just looking at market value. All right, so some more helpful hints about those formal hearings. There's limited time in there. We're trying to be considerate of everyone's time. We want to make sure that everyone feels heard, but we also want to make sure that everyone feels heard. And so we have a lot of protests. We try to keep each of those hearings to a total of about 15 minutes to make sure that we can address your property, and then also that we have time to address everyone else's property who's scheduled that day. So since there's limited time, make sure that you're prepared. Have all of your evidence organized. Try to make it organized in the same order as your main points that you want to make. Bring extra copies of your evidence, because you'll want to have a copy that you can kind of refer to as you're going through your presentation. And then each of the panel members, whether it's a 3-member panel or a single-member panel, they'll want to have a copy that they can look at, and then the appraiser who's representing the district will want to have a copy that we can review and keep for our evidence as well. So typically, if you're going to a 3-person ARB hearing, you'll want to have 5 copies of whatever evidence you plan to present. So for yourself, for the appraisal, and for any panel members for those in-person hearings. All right, so we have several important dates in our annual appraisal calendar. The first one that we've talked about some is January 1st. This is every year, this is the date of appraisal. Whatever the condition of your property as of January 1st, your value is based on that. So, unfortunately, if something occurs and the condition of your home changes drastically in January, if it happened after January 1st, we're looking at the condition as of January 1st. So that's an important date to keep in mind. That's the date of appraisal. And that's also important to keep in mind when you're looking at sales to compare to your property as well. When we are valuing the property for January 1st, we're looking at sales that occurred during last calendar year. So during the calendar year of 2025, and then into January of 2026, those are the sales that we use to value the property for January 1st of 2026. So those are going to be, that's going to be the time frame of sales that we're looking at. And so if you have comparable sales you want to present, it's best if they're within that same time frame. That helps us be looking at the same information and helps us determine a value for that appraisal date. Another important date to know, as I mentioned, is May 15th. This is the protest deadline. So protests must be filed by this date for any value change to occur before values are provided to the jurisdictions and tax bills are calculated. So this is by law, this is the date. It's either May 15th or 30 days from the date on your notice, whichever is later. So if your notice was sent out later for whatever reason, your notice wasn't sent out until April 27th, then your deadline will be 30 days after April 27th. And then in October or November is when the tax bills are mailed out. So once we have certified the rolls and we've turned them over to the taxing jurisdictions, then they generate the tax bills and that's when those are sent out. So in Harris County, billing and collection is handled by the local tax assessors. No part of that is handled by Harris Central Appraisal District. We turn those rolls over and then the tax rates are set and the bills are generated by the tax assessors and sent out, and that's where the billing and collections is all handled. And then the last important date to keep in mind is February 1st. That's the delinquency date. That's when penalties and interest start to accrue if the taxes are not paid. And so while we started here in January 1st of 2026, we go through this whole cycle. And then on February 1st of 2027 is the date on which the taxes will be delinquent if they're not paid for this tax year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tawana Nelson to talk some about exemptions.
Thank you, Sarah. So the property tax exemptions, I'm sorry, there's something obstructing my view. Give me just a moment. The most common residential exemptions are the general residence homestead, the over 65, the disability exemption, the over 55 surviving spouse, disabled veterans, and other service-related exemptions. The exemptions exclude part of your property from taxation. The most common residential exemptions are the general residence homestead exemption, which is section 11.13 of the tax code. You must own and occupy the home as your primary residence. The documentation required is proof of ownership and a Texas driver's license or state-issued ID. It provides a 10% appraisal increase cap, which means that from the first year that you have your full residential homestead, your property value from that year to the next year cannot increase by more than 10%. The general residence homestead exemption also offers a $140,000 school tax exemption by state law. Other exemptions may be offered by various jurisdictions, city, county, special district. It depends on where you live. The over 65 and disability exemption. The over 65 exemption, you qualify for the entire year that you turn 65. It does not matter if you turn 65 on December 31st. You'll receive your the over 65 exemption for that entire tax year. The disability exemption, you will qualify for the entire year that you became eligible to receive disability benefits under federal old age survivors and disability insurance. Um, you can either submit the information from the Social Security Administration, or you can provide us with a physician's statement. The benefits for either exemption, you get an additional $60,000 exemption for school taxes, and school taxes are limited or frozen. Exemptions granted to homeowners with general residence homestead exemption. You're eligible for tax deferral and to pay taxes in installments without penalties. Other exemptions may be granted by individual jurisdictions. There are special payment options offered by the tax assessor collector. The immediate residence homestead exemption is an exemption that's granted when you qualify upon occupying your home. It's regarding new builds or homes where the previous owner had no exemptions. You must apply before the first anniversary of the date the property was acquired. If the previous owner did not have exemptions or the home was never occupied, the exemption will be granted as follows. The first year will be a prorated exemption. The second year will be a full exemption, which also establishes your cap eligibility base year. If the home was previously owned and receiving exemptions, the previous owner's exemption will remain for the remainder of the applicable tax year. Airship exemptions. The steps for receiving airship exemptions if ownership is shared by multiple heirs. The important questions are, is the property for which this application is submitted an heir property? That's the ones that you see highlighted in section 3 of the homestead exemption application. And then the second was, do other heir properties do other heir property owners occupy the property? Those two questions must be answered if you're submitting an airship exemption application. The information needed with your application is an affidavit establishing ownership of interest in the property. This can be an airship affidavit or Form 50-114A under affidavits. The death certificate for the prior owner of the property, a copy of the property's most recent utility bill, a citation of any court record relating to the applicant's ownership of the property, if applicable. How to apply for the exemptions. The exemption wizard helps you determine if you are eligible. You can go to www.hcad.org to find out, or you can mail a paper form. You can submit your application through our website. You can use the mobile app or email. Depending on when submitted, the processing time may take longer. It's important to submit everything at once to avoid delay in processing. Once applied to your account, you will be notified. How-to videos for completing your application is available at www.hcad.org, forms and popular forms. The annual exemptions confirmation card. The confirmation card is typically mailed in December to those with existing exemptions. The front part of the card gives you your property information as far as for your account number. It has your street address and which exemptions are on the account, as well as the property owner's name and the mailing address that we sent the notification to. On the back of the postcard, it shows you that for the previous tax year, you had a specific exemption which showed on the front, and then for the coming up tax year, you would have that same exemption if nothing has changed at your home. If you need further information or wish to contact us, we're located at 13013 Northwest Freeway, Houston, Texas 77040. You can also contact us at 713-957-7800. through our website. You can also look up information. You can go to www.hcad.org. There you'll find maps, forms, property search, instructive videos, remote hearing instructions, workshops, and events. And if you would like to, there's a under hcad.org. Once you get there, if you click on Contact Us, there's going to be a form that pops up where you'll be able to submit your question through our website. Also, just to conclude, I would like to let you know that I'll be available since my part of the presentation is done to assist in the chat with the questions and also the live stream questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Tawana. I think, Shay, that makes you up next.
All righty, let me make sure that my screen can get shared. Bear with me just a second. All right, can everybody see everything okay?
It's loading. Yes. Yep, got it.
Wonderful. All right. Well, hello, everyone. Again, I'm not going to be showing my camera just because I do find it to be a bit distracting because it's lagging so much. But my name is Shay Pinkowski, and I'm here with the Office of Annette Ramirez, who is our Harris County Tax Assessor Collector. And I'm going to be sharing some information about how your bills are calculated, what options you have for payments, as well as some new and exciting things that have been happening this year. So I'm just going to go right into it. So what we do, aside from collecting property taxes, which is what most folks who are in this presentation are aware of, we also register voters for Harris County, and we process auto services, including your vehicle's registration stickers, the transfer of vehicles through title transfers, and as well as not only for individuals, but for dealerships and car sales as well. So we do quite a few things in our office in order to, continue to have funding received through Harris County. But just to sum it up briefly, these are the three things that we're best known for. So just as you might be aware of the fact that Harris County is the third largest county in the country, but those numbers from Harris County are kind of crazy whenever you're looking at it over the big picture. But we generate approximately $1.4 billion in revenue from just auto services alone. We generate approximately $8.5 billion from property tax revenue each year, or this year rather, as well as hotel motel taxes, which are collected in an amount of about $95 million. And we have 16 locations. So it's not just one centralized office. We also have 16 separate branch locations in which you are able to conduct these businesses. We've registered more than 2.7 million voters this year. So just to get an idea of how large Harris County really is, these are approximately the numbers in which we've had this past year. So the property tax system rolls in a type of cycle. The initial part is the appraisal phase, which is when the Harris Central Appraisal District goes forward and they appraise your value of the property to determine what percentage or what amount of that property can be taxed on. The next phase after that is the equalization phase, which HCAD mentioned earlier, is the portion where you go and protest your tax value, your appraisal values, and of course go through the process of getting exemptions placed onto the account, as well as verifying the information that is on there is correct. The phase following that one is our assessment phase. This is where the taxing jurisdictions determine what the value of their tax rate is going to be for that year. So typically, if you contact us in the early part of the year before the end of summer, asking for an estimate of how much your taxes are going to be, you'll usually hear the answer that we don't have the tax rates for that year yet, and that is because that process isn't complete until October. So typically we aren't able to give you an exact estimate until after that point. And then after that point, in which from November to June is our collection phase. So that's when the Harris County Tax Office and all other taxing offices will go forward, send out their statements in the mail. You'll be receiving mailed statements, or if you go through something called an e-bill, you'll receive it in the email. But this is the part of the year in which you are receiving your statements and paying your taxes. So this is typically how the cycle goes, and it repeats over and over again. So just so you're kind of familiar of how that process goes. Calculating your tax bill. So the appraisal part is where they determine the value of the property. Now, with that value of the property and the exemptions that are applicable to that property, we determine the tax bill by multiplying that taxable value of your property by the rate of each jurisdiction. Now, the math can sometimes get a bit complicated because we have to calculate per jurisdiction, not all together as one lump sum. So whenever you receive your bill, you'll receive that itemized by jurisdiction. So you can see what jurisdiction allows for which exemptions, and then how that calculates out to your total. But that's usually how tax bills are calculated. Some of those changes that we've been seeing lately involve your property tax bills. So just as a brief show of all the changes that have been happening, because there have been quite a few, the general homestead exemption provided to you by your school, which is your ISD, increased. So it went from $100,000 to $140,000. Your over 65 and disabled homestead property tax owners for that school jurisdictions increased from $10,000 to $60,000, and they have expanded the qualifications for the exemptions of surviving spouses of veterans whose death was due to a service-related condition. So they've expanded it to allow for more opportunity for those surviving spouses to be able to have those benefits. Along with allowing the temporary exemption for improvement of a residence destroyed by fire, meaning that if your property is destroyed by fire, there are exemptions that will be allowing for that. And then, of course, the business personal property exemption has gone up to $125,000 for the 2026 tax year, which is not this one that we've just finished paying, but this one upcoming. So there are quite a few changes, and things are changing every day. So it's really good to stay involved and to make sure that you're aware of what changes are heading your way. So we have here some brief calculations based off of the information that is at the bottom, which is a tax bill for the values of the properties that are listed there. But these are based on Houston ISD, the City of Houston, Harris County, the Harris County Port Authority, Harris County Flood Control, Hospital District, along with the Harris County Department of Education and the Houston City College, previously Houston Community College. So based off of these jurisdictions that are applicable to most of the folks who are living in Houston, you can see approximately how much your bill would be without any exemptions versus with a homestead exemption versus with a homestead and an over 65 exemption. So as you can see, the differences vary quite a bit, having almost $8,500 due on a property of $400,000 versus with a homestead exemption, getting that reduced by almost $3,000, and then getting it reduced even further once you have the homestead and over 65 or homestead and disabled persons exemption applied, getting it reduced to $1,516. Similarly, for a property that is of a smaller value of $250,000, you can see that the property originally would have been collected something in the realm of $5,000. Versus a property with a homestead exemption, that same property, having a statement of little over $3,000 with the homestead, it's a reduction of $2,000, and homestead exemption and disabled persons or over 65 would total up to be a bill of about $71. So you can really see the difference between not having any exemptions versus having the homestead on its own and having the homestead and the over 65 or homestead and disabled persons exemption. So we really like to make sure that those folks who are applicable to those exemptions are applying for them in order so that they would have a reduced bill. So it is really important that you are aware of what is available to you and how to get that process taken care of and getting those applied to your account. Another benefit that a lot of folks aren't really familiar with is something called the tax limitation. And I do feel like a part of the reason that a lot of folks aren't acknowledged in that fact is because it is something that is done automatically. It's not something that you have to go apply for. This is just something that happens when a property owner with a homestead and over 65 or a homestead and a disabled person's exemptions are owners of the property for more than 2 years. You start to see this, you might see this tax ceiling depending on the values. But essentially what it does is it limits the increase of your school jurisdiction's taxes. So in this case, for Houston ISD, for instance, if the property collected the initial year in which you turned 65 and had that 65 years or over exemption applied to the account, the following year, even if the value of your property dictates that you would pay a higher amount the following year, your taxes would stay frozen at the same value in which they were the year that you turned over the age of 65. So that is a really big help for folks who are over the age of 65 or disabled and who have that homestead and exemptions applied. Because like I said before, it's not something you have to apply for. It's just something that is automatically calculated in your bill. And essentially your tax bill for your school district, only the school district, would not increase past the amount in which you had the first year that you turned over the age of 65. So it's very helpful. You can always pay less, you just would not pay more than you would have in that year. Another option and another really great benefit to the homestead and over 65 or homestead and disability exemptions are something called a tax deferral. This is something that you apply with through the Harris Central Appraisal District. But what it does is it postpones your taxes, and in an effort to prevent foreclosure and the loss of property for our folks who are over the age of 65 and homestead owners, or same as before, disabled persons or disabled veterans. And when you apply for that deferral, you are collected your property taxes at a 5% interest per year, as opposed to paying penalty and interest fees on your property for, depending on the time in which that is delinquent, you would pay a 5% interest per year, which totals out to, I believe it's 0.5% per month. But essentially, the taxes are still owed on your property. This is not an exemption. You do not have your exemption separated from the deferral. You would still be collected on the amount after exemptions, but those taxes that are due are postponed and give you the opportunity to have additional time in which to make those payments without incurring those additional penalties that would normally apply. Deferral ends upon the ownership change of the property. So if that over 65 or disabled veterans person that owned the property is either no longer living in the property, they've sold it, they've transferred ownership to their children, or they unfortunately pass away, then all deferred taxes would be due upon 181 days. They have to pay with the 5% interest. After the 181 days, they would be assessed with penalty and interest fees as normal. So just be aware, make sure that if you are interested or you're planning on applying for the deferral, or if you've applied for a deferral already, that your heirs are aware of the taxes still being due for that time. Like I mentioned before, this is something you would apply with through the Harris Central Appraisal District. And in order to qualify for the tax deferral, you must have it on your homestead residence, and the property owner must be over the age of 65 or a disabled homeowner or a disabled veteran. And just one small note that I would like to include in that, while it is very helpful to have the deferral for those just-in-case situations, you are still able to make your tax payments as normal. You're not required to defer your taxes, but it is a protection in the cases of the need to have those deferrals coming up. You will want to consult with with your mortgage company if your property is still under a mortgage, as not all banks will allow you to defer your taxes while still making payments to a mortgage. So just keep that in mind. Another benefit that our over 65 disabled persons and disabled veteran homeowners have is something called a quarterly payment plan. Now, this is something that our taxing office allows for, which essentially splits your entire bill. So the bill that is due at the end of January each year, that bill can be split into 4 equal payments. And each of those 4 equal payments are due at the end of every other month from the beginning of the year. So first bill due end of January, the second quarter being due at the end of March, the third quarter being due at the end of May, and the fourth quarter being due at the end of July. Now, you do have to submit a request for this quarterly payment plan to be taken into effect, and it cannot be begun more than a month late. So initial payment is due in January. If you miss it and you pay in February, we can still begin that, although you do get penalty and interest fees for that first payment. But so long as you're able to make the consequent payments timely, then you're able to have it. But if it's past that first month late, then unfortunately it can't be applied. But for next year, whenever those tax bills become due, it is an option for those folks who have those exemptions and can apply for it. For those of us who are not over the age of 65 or have property that is not a homestead, maybe it's a business, maybe it's a separate piece of land without a building on it, no improvements, there are delinquent payment plans available to us through the Harris County Tax Office, and they allow us to make our payments with penalty and interest, but with proper planning and time. Making a payment plan and keeping those schedules help you avoid additional fees with attorneys. It helps you avoid court costs. So long as you're making those timely payments, it helps you avoid that the beginnings of those foreclosure plans. So it is something to keep in mind if you do own property and you're aware that you're unable to make those payments in full at the beginning of the year. A payment plan can begin as soon as the account is delinquent. So for most of us, that's going to be February. And of course, you can make those either through our website, online, by phone, if you give us our offices a call, or if you go to any of those 16 branch locations I mentioned earlier, you're able to make those payment agreements there as well. So we've recently rolled out a new website in which you are able to make your payments online, and that just happened this past year. But you can also set up your due date reminders, meaning that you would get a reminder from this upcoming year in December, January, that your statements are available, and it'll remind you to make your payments. You can make your payments online, as always. But in this case, since you would be creating an account, you are able to save your payment method. You wouldn't have to continue to retype in your bank information or your account number. It saves your information so long as you request for it to save. And you are able to view any receipts that you make in your account at any time. So it is a really great help. It has a lot of great features. And we've actually just started allowing to accept prepayments, meaning that if you know that your payments are going to be coming up next year, you just purchased a property or you've been paying property taxes for X amount of years, you can go online and request for a prepayment plan. And what it'll do is it'll provide you an estimate based off of last year's taxes, and it'll split that amount up between the number of months from when you begin your payment agreement to October, allowing you that additional time to make any payments. There's no fees for making late. There's no fees for not making a payment, and it's not a required payment. It's optional. But it does give you that option to preemptively make those payments so that you have a smaller balance due at the end of January. And that is something that makes it a lot more convenient for a lot of folks here. So I'm really excited to have that new program available. I've provided a QR code. If you'd like to go ahead and snap a picture of that, I'll give a minute and speak a little bit further on it. But it is an option for you, and we do recommend, if you're going to begin this process of making your account, that you go forward and actually create the account for following years. You would like to continue to have that account available to you so that you can have for the next year your payment information all in one place, and it is very, very helpful. Our payment options are listed below, or are listed here on the screen. You can make your payments online through that website that I provided earlier. You can also mail in your payments if you plan on mailing in a check, money order, or cashier's check. You can do so to our PO box. Alternatively, if you prefer to pay by phone, you can pay with a card over the phone through our phone number 713-274-2273. Or if you'd prefer to pay in cash or card or cashier's check or check itself, you can come into any one of our branch offices and make your payments in person. They'd be able to provide you with a receipt, and it is a very quick and easy way to make your payments. Now, there are some additional fees that we are required to collect for credit cards of 2.4%, in addition to our e-check payments, which are 50 cents per e-check. So if you have multiple payments, you can pay them all on one single e-check, and it's still the 50 cents. Cash, of course, at a branch, there is no fee, and there is no fee for paying with a check. We offer a lot of different methods of receiving information, along with making your payment plans and trying to assist our taxpayers in reducing the burden of paying your taxes. While we may not be able to affect how much you pay, we are able to hopefully make the process easier for you. So we're making efforts into making that a simpler and easier way to pay. But if you have any questions about it, please feel free to give us a call or reach out to us through our email address or our website. I've included the contact information below, and because I have been presenting here, I have not seen the chat, but I have been seeing several little notifications come up. So let me go ahead and take a look at that to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'm sure Neil will be hopping on here in a moment.
Yeah. Are you guys ready for the Q&A part?
Yep, I can go ahead and stop sharing whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and get that done. And I know Miss Tawana and Jamie and Joseph have been assisting with answering the questions in the chat. And I know that you guys have been answering in the chat, so I'm only gonna kind of go over a few of them that I know where people may have had the same kind of question. So to read it aloud, just to make sure that everybody hears the answers. So for those that cannot see, and also for the folks that are online, they can't see the chat. So I want to make sure that they all get the same answer. The question here, I believe this is for Sarah. If Texas is a non-disclosure state, how do you know what the neighborhood sales are?
Right. So I believe that was answered by one of our fellow analysts. We receive that information through a vendor who provides us with some information. Some sales are disclosed to us, and so we don't get every sale, but we get quite a few of them through those alternative means.
Okay. It says that you mentioned that the evidence is made available 14 days before the scheduled hearing. Does that mean 14 days before the informal hearing?
Yes.
Okay. What is the best way to handle getting tax information about taxes due when there are one or more owners, such as the siblings? And what if one of the owners is a disabled veteran?
The best way to get information about taxes due, I believe, is going to be through the tax office. So I think that's a Shay question.
I'm sorry, for which one? I'm trying to scroll through the chat.
The best way to handle getting information about the taxes that are due, especially when there's more than one owners, like if they're siblings. And what if one of the owners is a disabled veteran?
So as far as seeing the statements themselves, our new system allows you to add properties. So if each of the siblings created an account, or if they all had one joint account on our website, everyone would be able to see all the payments made, and they would be able to see what amounts are due for the properties or property. The traditional way would be the billing address or the mailing address that is on the statement, which is provided to us by the Harris Central Appraisal District. That is where we would send our statements in the mail. So typically old-fashioned way would be you would receive a statement in the mail, or you would have to check in through our website or check into our offices and request for the amounts due. But the new system makes that just a little bit easier, because you're all able to either share an account and all be users, or you can each set up your own user information for the account and be able to see the payments that you make on that account. So it's really up to your own preference and how you would prefer to handle that as far as what amounts are due. But as far as who would be exempt, or if any exemptions would be applicable, that's something that HCAD would be able to assist a bit further with, because at that point it would depend on, is that person who is, or is that sibling or heir that is disabled, are they living in the property? Is it just something that they have an heirship interest in? Or what the exact situation is with that. And I know that we don't like to put all of our business out there. So as far as what exemptions might be applicable, that's something you'll want to reach out to the appraisal district for. But as far as seeing your bill, you're able to do that online, or by either coming into a branch office for the Harris County Tax Office, or by requesting it over the phone or via email.
So, Ms. Tawana, in that instance, if you got multiple owners and one of them so happens to be disabled, what happens in that situation?
If they've already applied for their exemptions, okay, so from my understanding, the tax office only generates one tax bill for the entire tax year. So if, depending upon their ownership, like let's say it's two siblings that live together and they're the only two there, well, what that disabled veteran is going to get his 50% of his exemption for the portion of the property that he owns. He just needs to apply for it.
Okay. How long does the over 65 exemption remain in effect?
The over 65 exemption stays on the account for as long as the person who is over 65 owns and occupies the property.
So there is no renewal process or anything like that that needs to be done. It doesn't like fall off or anything like that.
There's a possibility that it could happen, but before it happens, we notify you. One of those examples is the confirmation card that I was referring to in the slideshow. If that confirmation card is returned to us, then before we just take action, if someone is over the age of 65, we'll send them a notification in the mail letting them know, we received a confirmation card back from you. Can you please explain to us what's going on at the property? We give them time to respond because they're over the age of 65 or disabled before we just take action on the account. And we don't just send that one letter. We send like 3 different letters if we don't receive any type of response, and then we take action.
That was one of those things that that I also saw that was kind of floating around social media that I tried to respond to just about every chance I could get, that people were under the assumption that they had to reapply for their exemption every year.
No, you don't need to reapply for it every year. You just need to respond if we contact you. That's the most important part.
You also don't need to pay anyone to file your exemptions for you.
No, please don't.
Completely free to do through our website, our app, all of that. Sometimes mailers go out saying, pay us and we'll file your exemptions for you. You never need to pay someone to file your exemptions for you.
Right.
Yes, indeed. A lot of scams that are out there too, just to trying to get the information. So be careful about that. If all else fails, look up the phone number for the appraisal district, wherever your property is located, and call them. Don't call a phone number that's on one of the forms or cards or something like that that you get in the mail, because if it's a scam, you're going to get that person that's trying to scam you, and they're going to give you whatever information that that they want. So do the search online or call the operator if you need to and say, hey, I'm looking for the phone number, and make sure that you're calling the right place. Let's see. I previously got actual sales data for a neighboring home for the protest, and then the county did not acknowledge the actual sales value I presented and argued inflated the value based on some multiplier they applied at the end of the year. Can you explain that and how they argued the inflated value compared to the true value, to the true sale value?
Okay, so a couple of things. When we're, like I said, when we're valuing as of January 1st of 2026, what we're looking at are sales that occurred during 2025 and then January of 26. So 13 months of sales is what we're using for that valuation. Since we're looking at sales all the way back from January of 2025, nearly a year prior to our current valuation date, a lot can have happened in the market during that time. And so you may be in an area where there's a particularly active market where sales have increased over the course of the year. If that is the case, then we may have what's called a time adjustment on in that area, where if a sale occurred in February of 2025, but we have to value as of January 1st of 2026, we adjust that sale to what we estimate it would have sold for if it had sold January 1st, 2026 instead. So if it sold 11 months before, and the sale prices steadily went up in that area during that time, we will adjust it upward to what it would have sold for later in the year. So if a sale that you provided was in an area like that where there was an increasing market over the course of the year and that sale occurred several months before January 1st, then we would adjust that sale for January 1st. If the sale you provided was outside that date range entirely, so of course we're talking about a previous year, but if the sale that you provided was from a year, more than a year prior to the current tax year, then it's not really still indicative of what the current market conditions would have been. So we're really trying to look at stuff as close to January 1st as possible. And so this year, as you look for sales to compare for your protest, we're going to be prioritizing sales that happened during 2025. And those time adjustments are area dependent. And so some areas we see an increasing market, some areas stay pretty flat, some areas may even have a decreasing market. And so whatever the conditions are in that area are going to inform those time adjustments.
If you protest the market value, how does that change the appraised tax assessment?
If your protest results in a lower market value below what your current appraised value is, then your appraised value will be lowered to match it. So in order to see a change in your appraised value, your market value would need to dip below where your appraised value is.
Okay. Is there a benefit to paying your taxes or paying the tax bill before December 31st or by December 31st? That would be a Shay question. And Shay, you're muted.
I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Sorry about that. One more time, please. I'm trying to, again, scroll through the chat.
Is there an advantage to paying your taxes by December 31st?
Oh, I think I replied to that one in the chat. Apologies. So
no. All of the questions that I'm going over, I'm just reading them aloud, even though that you guys answer, because not everybody reads the chat, and the people online don't have access to the chat to see the questions that are being asked and answered. So I'm just kind of picking through some of them to read aloud.
Yeah, no problem. So there's not a benefit through the Harris County Tax Office to paying your taxes before December 31st, other than, being able to say, hey, I paid my taxes and I don't have to worry about it anymore for the rest of the year. However, I have heard of taxpayers paying their taxes prior to the end of December and then taking that receipt and providing it to their tax person or, whatever company they go through, or if they, file their federal taxes on their own. I have heard of folks making their payment prior to the end of December so that they can provide that proof to their taxing person for federal taxes as proof that they paid property taxes that year. But that is a question better suited to be answered by someone who works with the IRS, or if you have a tax person that does your federal taxes for you. It doesn't really have anything to do with our office specifically, other than the fact that you are paying a bill to our office. So it's not really anything that I would be able to help with directly, unfortunately.
Yeah, so you would have to contact your own account, your personal accountant or bookkeeper to talk about that.
Right, to see if that would benefit you at all. But I have heard of it happening.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe that it has to be over a certain amount or a certain value or something like that before anything gets applied
Federal
as far as
taxes are,
yeah.
yeah, they're a whole separate ball game. Unfortunately, I'm not super well versed in, federal taxes and how they're impacted by property taxes, just because it's not something that directly affects our office. So while I have heard of folks doing it, I'm not sure what the requirements are, or you can file for any amount, or if it's only applicable past a certain threshold. But I've seen it happen with folks who don't pay, an obscene amount of taxes. So there might be some benefit in it, but the best person to ask for that either would be a personal accountant, or maybe checking through the IRS website. They might have frequently asked questions, or what's applicable as a reduction for your taxes. That's something that you might want to, research separately.
Okay.
But it is an option for you if you choose to pay before the end of January.
Okay. The market value is based on an if you sold. So why should you be assessed based on this? Should you be assessed based on the actual amount of the actual of the home being sold?
Okay,
And Joseph
so
did answer that.
yeah, so the general question there is, if I didn't sell my home this year, why should I be valued as if I'm selling? And that kind of goes back to the tax code. We're required to appraise, every year as of January 1st, the full market value of a home as of January 1st. So that means we've got to make our best estimate of what it would fetch on the market as of January 1st. Because not every home sells every year, right? We can't always match a purchase price because you don't have a purchase price this year if you didn't just sell your home. And we aren't just going to, the last time you purchased your home may have been several years ago. And so we're not going to just keep it at that value. We've got to reappraise it each year for what the market is currently indicating.
And when should somebody apply for their over 65 exemption? Like when do they have to wait till their actual birthday or after or at the end of the year? When is it best to apply?
A property owner can apply for the over 65 exemption within 3 months of them turning 65. And it will apply for the entire tax year. So if they want to submit a request through the website, or if they want to do it through the mobile app, I would suggest waiting until you're actually 65, because we've gotten a mixed response from the mobile app. Sometimes it will approve it, sometimes it won't. So if once you're either on your birthday or the day after, go ahead and submit your over 65 exemption request through the mobile app, and it should automatically grant it for you. But other than bringing the application up to our office, you can also mail it in.
Okay. So what if somebody's birthday is like in December and
If I was working that
the ticket is,
application today, then I
mhm.
would have to send them a letter letting them know that they're applying too early. They can
Yeah. No. So my question was that if they wait until if it's for that year that they actually turn 65 and their birthday is not until like December and they don't apply until December, what happens to the 2026 tax bill because their exemption is supposed to be applied for 2026?
Okay, so I understand. I apologize.
That's okay.
So when they apply for the exemption, once we granted it, we only send information over to the tax office once per month. So after we grant it, then we'll go ahead and send the information over to the tax office. Once they've updated their systems, if the property owner has already paid their tax bill, then any amount that they overpaid for that tax year that they turned 65, that they submitted their application for, will automatically be refunded to them.
Okay, so they still need to go ahead and pay the entire amount for that year. Don't wait until after
Right.
some exemptions and credits. Okay, got it. Okay. What is the difference between the I file and I settle, or are they the same thing?
So iFile is just the process of submitting your protest. So that iFile number allows you to use our iFile system to submit a protest. The iSettle program is something you can opt into where you could receive an offer electronically, and it would take the place of an informal meeting. So iFile is just the program that lets you, the process that you can file your protest. And then the iSettle is you could receive an offer to settle your value in place of an informal meeting.
Gotcha. Let's see. If I'm getting quotes for repairs to protest the condition, should the quote be dated before or after the January 1st assessment date? And when, yeah, and the photos that need to be submitted, are they need to be before or after January 1st?
Before or after doesn't matter so much as just the fact that it's very near that date. We're trying to do our best to get an idea of the condition of the property as of that date. So, whether it's December 28th or January 5th, as long as we can get an idea what the condition was as of January 1st, that's the most important thing. So, if it's more helpful to see what the condition was a couple days before January 1st, or after, then yeah, it doesn't really matter whether it's before or after, as long as we're close to that.
Gotcha. Okay. How do you find out, Shay? This is Shay question. How do you find out the amount that someone has had deferred, if they have deferred property taxes?
So all of those deferred taxes are going to show on your statements as any tax amounts would. It's not going to hide it from you. The information is all going to be available on your statements when you get them every year, along with your statements online. So whenever you defer your taxes, that postponement only affects the penalty and interest that you normally would be assessed. Instead of paying penalty and interest, you would just pay that 5% interest per year. But all of that information is readily available for you online through a branch office, in person if you'd prefer to go in person, or if you were to call us over the phone and just request, hey, I know my taxes are deferred. I'd like to know how much my taxes are for how much I owe in taxes total. They'd be able to give you that information over the phone as well. Only difference would be if you were asking for, in order to pay later on, like state you were past that 181 days. Like I mentioned before, if once you pass that point, you start collecting based off of penalty and interest as if it had never been deferred prior. At that point, you might need to request it from us in an email or by going into a branch office to request it by a form. But if you're just asking, if you're over the age of 65 and you know that you deferred your taxes, but you just would like to know how much your taxes are in order to tell your heirs, you can do that by phone call. You can check on our website to see it online, request it by email, or go into a branch office and request for a copy of your statement. And all of that will be shown on there.
Okay. I'm going to jump to a question that was emailed to me that I've always thought was very interesting. How does a person end up paying taxes for two separate counties?
So it kind of depends on where the lay of the land is. So say, for instance, we have a couple of properties that exist in Fort Bend County, but they are also technically paying taxes to City of Houston. So they'll have a City of Houston tax bill because they're technically still in the City of Houston, but they're not located in Harris County, they're located in Fort Bend. So Fort Bend would collect for most of their taxes, but then they would receive a city bill from Harris County.
It's also entirely possible that a property sits on a county line.
Halfway.
That's right. And may sit on a county line. There's whole neighborhoods that span two counties. And so half the neighborhood may sit in Harris County and half may sit in Liberty County. And some of the individual properties will be on that line. And so wherever that line is drawn through your property, What we do is we try to determine, between the two counties, which what portion sits in which county. And so then you should have, split jurisdictions where if 60% of your property sits in Harris County and 40% sits in Liberty, then 60% of the value of your property will be taxed in Harris County.
Okay. Let's see. If I do an I-file, am I still able to do an informal hearing, or do I have to go straight to a formal ARB hearing if you're not satisfied with the outcome of the I-file?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
If I do an I-file, am I still able to do an informal hearing, or do I have to go straight to a formal ARB hearing if I'm not satisfied with the outcome of I-file?
Yeah, so if you opt into the iSettle program and we review and we are able to make an offer, because sometimes we review and we are not able to make an offer. So if we don't make any offer through that iSettle program, then you can still go to an informal meeting because you haven't had one yet. If we are able to make an offer, if you receive an email that says, here's what we're offering as a value to settle at, then that takes the place of the informal meeting. And so at that point, if you do not accept the iSettle offer, you will go straight to a formal ARB hearing.
Okay, Ms. Tawana, you've got a husband and wife that are both turning 65 in the same year, but different months. Who applies first, or does it have to be, you have to wait until the other one, the later date before you apply, or how does that work?
The first person who turns 65, as long as they're listed on the property as, husband and wife, then the first person who turns 65 can apply. So yeah, the only issue that I've seen come up is if the people are married, but the person that's turning 65 is not on the property.
Not on the deed.
Right. They're
Mm.
not on the deed, and we receive applications, but we can't grant it because that person doesn't have ownership in the property. That's when we run into a problem.
And if that's the case, then what do they need to do? Then well, I guess that's kind of depends on them. I don't even want to get into that part. That's a whole nother can there. Yeah, we're not even gonna get into that question. So disregard that altogether. Um, to, 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 let's see. For a rental property, can you protest using the net operating income, or what is the NOI range accepted by the county?
Right, so we are, obviously there's lots of areas where some of the homes are rental properties. We're required to determine the highest and best use. And so what that means is if the majority of the neighborhood is, single family homes owned by individual owners, who are not renting the property, and we have sales activity in that neighborhood as we would typically expect to see, then the highest and best use of that property is that, and its market value would be, you could put it on the market and it would sell like the other homes in the neighborhood. So if we have sales activity, that's how we're going to value that neighborhood. We do have some areas where there's such a majority of rental property, or it's all owned by one entity and being rented out. And in those cases, if the majority of the neighborhood is income deriving property, then we may value the neighborhood on an income basis. But the highest and best use in a neighborhood that's primarily single ownership and has sales activity, we're going to value it based on those sales.
Okay, there's a couple of other questions that were emailed to me, but I wanted to get this addressed since we were talking about the husband and wife and getting the exemption. And I've had this conversation with Ms. Mabel, and it's been a while since I've had it. When you have a husband and wife, they both qualify or get the 100% exemption
Mhm.
if they're over the 65 for the entire house. if it's a mother and a child or father or a parent and a child, and only the parent is over the age of 65, then only 50% of the house is eligible for the over 65 exemption, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That is so unfair. But I understand why, but I just needed to make that differentiation because I had someone that I know was a client that purchased a house with her mother, and the mother was over 65, and she disputed up and down why is it that the whole property wasn't eligible for the over 65 exemption. And
It
And the
kind of
daughter
goes back to
probably doesn't
the,
even live there.
yeah,
um
I said the daughter probably doesn't live there, and
no, no, no,
it
they
was
were
just,
living together because she was
oh,
taking
that's
care of her
good.
mom. Yeah, so because she was taking care of her mom, so but still only half the house was eligible for the over 65 exemption.
that kind of goes back to the question that we had about, if you had multiple owners and only one had a disability
Disability.
exemption,
Right.
yeah, if you've got multiple owners that aren't married and don't have the, I guess, community property because of that, then it's
Then,
their percent of ownership that the
right.
exemption would apply to.
So only because it's community property is the whole thing then eligible.
Yes.
Gotcha. When should somebody decide to, or when is it best to have someone to protest their own property taxes or hire a company to do it for them? Or
So,
is there a norm?
yeah, so, I mean, ultimately, you are the best, you're the expert on your property. You can hire somebody to do your protest for you, but they're not going to know your property like you do. You're the expert there. You're going to be able to give us the best detailed information. So if you have the time, if you have the ability to come in and do it yourself and save yourself the expense of hiring a company, you're going to be able to give us more detailed information than somebody else would on your behalf. But that's really not up to us. If you don't have the time or the ability to come in and do that yourself, and you want to hire and somebody to represent you, that's your prerogative.
Or somebody
Um,
that just don't want to be bothered? I don't want to deal with all this. I'm gonna just let somebody else do it and be done. That's
but
optional.
but my recommendation would be, again, you're the expert on your property, and so however you choose to go about that, just still gather that information, that evidence, and provide it to either to us if you're doing your own protest, or to whoever's going to be doing your protest for you, to make sure that those details get communicated.
And do the research on the cost and compare who you're actually getting to do the protest for you. What's the fees involved and so on and so forth. Um,
Um,
even
One thing I just want to throw in there, also kind of look at what you may or may not get in savings, because you may end up paying more to get somebody to protest your property than you actually will in what you're saving on your property. So I would always recommend for people to research that, because if you just have the money to spend, that's fine. But I don't think everybody has the money to just be spending on someone, and they may not get you the savings that you're looking for.
or actually go through with the whole protest process. They may say they do, but let's see. Are property taxes overall in general the same? We get taxed in Houston and Fort Bend.
So, in a way, the way that we determine how much we tax is the same. Everybody in the state of Texas that pays property taxes the way we do, we all collect in the same way. We all get appraised for the value of our property. We all get exemptions if they're applicable to us. All of the jurisdictions that exist in Texas determine how much their rates are in the same way, because all of this is state mandated. And then they all use the same calculation to determine how much your taxes are. So in that way, yes, all of your property taxes overall in general are the same. However, of course, not all neighborhoods are the same. Not all houses are valued the same. Not all jurisdictions are able to give the exemptions that other jurisdictions are able to do. So sometimes when it's a smaller jurisdiction, if they're not able to apply as many exemptions to the account for that jurisdiction, Some may and some may not. So it really does, deciding where you're residing in is going to affect how much you pay in taxes just as much as, you know, picking a how much your house costs. So yes, they're all calculated in the same way. No, they are not all going to value similarly. A more incorporated area of, you know, Harris County is going to get more taxes because they're always building up. They're always getting more streets done. They're always getting more buildings. They're getting more people living there. You know, street signs, lights, everything. You know, the property taxes that are collected for an area that is much more upkept is going to be more than a property that is already in an established area. So, you know, yes and no. Just kind of depends on the exact details of the properties you're looking at.
Makes sense. Another interesting question here. How can you protest property taxes, or how can property tax protests be handled for someone who potentially has uh, mental or physical disabilities, or if they have dementia, or are now someone's power of attorney or whatever? How do you do that on their behalf?
So, you know, you can designate someone to be your representative on your protest. So when you file your protest form, there's a section on there where you can designate a representative, whether that's, you know, not necessarily a tax agent who you would hire, but, you know, my brother, my child, my, you know, whoever, someone you have a personal relationship, you can say, I want them to handle this protest for me. As long as that name is listed on there. And then, you know, in the case of maybe someone who's like you mentioned, dementia, someone who has mental incapacity, you know, hopefully there's already something like a power of attorney in place, and it helps to, you know, be able to have that documentation too. But as long as the representative's name is on our protest form, we'll typically honor that.
Okay. And my last question, because I don't see anything else that's been popping up in the chat, and I've gone over the emails and social media. So my last question, and this is a shade conversation, I guess. I always want to bring up and make sure that I reiterate to people or talk about paying somebody else's tax bills or past due tax payments or balances or past due property taxes. Does that entitle someone to ownership because they are paying property tax bills? Or, you know, when you see people online show up at this hotel, we'll give you free lunch and show you how to buy tax certificates and get properties in Texas, you know.
Absolutely not. So paying property taxes and owning the property itself, two completely separate things. You do not own the property just by paying property taxes, just the same as, you know, not paying property taxes does not stop me from owning my house. You know, if I own the property, then I have to go through a whole process with getting the deed in my name. That deed is in my name. That property belongs to me. That's one thing. If I don't pay my property taxes, then, you know, at some point the state or the county or another jurisdiction in HOA, for crying out loud, might take that house away from me. That's separate. That's a completely different thing. However, me paying my neighbor's property taxes because they have a nice little plot of land directly next to my house does not mean that I own that plot of land. I might be paying someone else's taxes for them, in which case, you know, I'm such a nice person. But it does not mean that I own that plot of land. I don't have any rights to that plot of land simply because I am paying the property taxes on it. You know, it doesn't actually affect ownership. It's just someone is paying the taxes, the attorney's offices, the HOAs, you know, someone's keeping up with the property next door and keeping it from being dilapidated, doesn't mean that I'm owning that property. I don't have any rights to that property. It just means that, you know, the attorneys, HOAs, other entities that might have normally taken that property away from someone who wasn't paying their taxes can't do that, because at that point, the taxes are being paid. How does the state know? How does the county know, you know, this person, you know, is not supposed to be paying their taxes or has no need to be paying their taxes? It's just paid piece of or a paid piece of property. So completely separate.
Good. I've seen those things like just about every day, or even especially when protest season and tax bills, it's time for the bills and stuff to come out or to be paid. I see those things all over the place, all over social media, where people just assume paying somebody's property taxes makes them now the owners of the property, especially if they're on bordering on foreclosure or what have you. But I did also want to bring up or to mention the reiterating again the difference between the exemptions and the deferrals, because we still get a lot of people that ask about, I don't want to do the exemption because my kids are going to have to pay that money back, or because I am now 65 years old, I no longer have to pay any taxes at all just because I'm over 65 now. Can you guys touch on those things?
So as far as the over 65 goes, that's the exemption that you're provided with. It doesn't mean that you won't pay taxes. You pay taxes based on what your appraised value is minus your exemptions. And it depends on what that appraised value is. Your over 65 exemption may not cover the entire appraised value of your property. As far as for the deferral goes, the deferral stays on the account as long as you're on there. If the property owner pays their taxes and they have a deferral on there just in case, we usually tell them it's a safety net for you just in case you can't afford to pay your taxes. So you don't have an issue where your property is up for sale because you didn't pay your actual taxes themselves. The deferral only comes off if the property owner requests for us to remove it, or if the ownership changes if the ownership changes. And once that deferral comes off, then yes, any balance that's left over from just the deferral from them not paying the actual taxes, then that amount will become due.
Or what happens when they pass away? Somebody that's had a deferral for 10 years and haven't paid taxes in 10 years.
It depends on how long ago they passed away. Again, but we're only able to update the information based on what we receive from the property owner. So if we were never notified, then once we do find out, we'll go ahead and remove the exemptions and the deferral, and then we'll send that information over to the tax office. Once the tax office receives that information, then they'll go ahead and update the balances accordingly and remove the exemptions. And then, of course, the tax bills will come out. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Shea said that they had 181 days in order to make to bring the balance up to a zero.
So they have 181 days from the date in which we notice them. So of course, the appraisal district sends it to us, and then it takes us some time in order to provide that new bill without the deferral on there, or the exemptions, if that's the case, that might be. We provide a new statement showing the values amounts due with the deferral on it based off of that 5% interest. And then they have 181 days in which to pay that balance with the deferred amount for interest. After those 181 days, at that point, then we start collecting penalty and interest fees as if that deferral was not on the property. And that's when you start coming into those bigger amounts, because at that point, you no longer have that 5% deferred interest. And then, if that person passed away from before the appraisal district found out about the process, or if no one mentioned it to the appraisal district and they didn't change it until, the following year, then that can also affect your exemptions, which in turn would affect how much you would pay for your taxes. So it's really something that you want to be on top of and know and be aware of what you're required to do. Because, owing an IOU is, fine and dandy whenever you have that deferral on there with that 5% interest. But once you start getting regular penalty and interest fees assessed on there, it starts to hurt. The percentages are exponentially bigger. So, good to be aware of.
So given that 10-year scenario, if my grandmother has had a property tax deferral for the last 10 years and she passed away 3 years ago, so still all 10 years are due, but then you receive the notice, that she passed 10 years ago, 3 years ago.
So at that point, it's, I see the question. So if at that point the property was not under the over 65 person's ownership, so they owned the property for 10 years, had it deferred for 10 years, and then the last 3 years the property had deferred taxes and an over 65 exemption and a homestead for someone who was no longer residing in that property. Those exemptions can get taken off, I believe it's 5 years. Tawana? Yes.
Right, but that's only okay. So if she passed away 3 years ago, the year that she passed away, those exemptions would still stay on. It would be the following tax year that we would take off the exemptions themselves. But the deferral, if she had a deferred amount, whatever amount that is, it's going to come due once the tax office informs you of the amount that's due. And then you'd have that 181 days before, like Ms. Shea said, the penalties and interest start going
Would be
crazy.
accrued like normal.
Yes.
Right. So in essence, she may have passed away 3 years ago, but for the remainder of that first year in which she passed, she keeps that 65 exemption. So it would be
Yes.
2 years. So then she would get 2 years without the homestead over 65 exemption, and then that gets changed. But the deferral amounts are the same for those 181 days. And after that deferral comes off at that point, then, the balances are changed to reflect those new changes to the exemptions, those penalty and interest fees, and, to reflect the new balances, because at that point, the balance is going to change also.
So in other
So it's
words,
always better to catch it on the front end. Always catch it on the front end. If you know that your properties are deferred and you have the over 65 exemption, you have the homestead exemption, fantastic. You can keep those on, as long as you're residing in that property. But make your plans for your heirs or whoever is going to heir that property from you, that they are aware that the taxes are deferred. They are aware that they need to notify the appraisal district of your passing, and that they need to notify the appraisal district that due to that, they no longer are applicable for those exemptions, so that everything runs smoothly and you don't get attached with taxes that had been due for, however long since that person passed.
that's exactly why it's important to actually even have the conversations, with your parents and grandparents or the older folks or what have you, if they've got a deferral, because sometimes they don't even want you to know. They don't want to have the conversation or let you know that they're having some kind of financial difficulty and that they've applied for a deferral or what have you. So have the conversation, say, hey, it's, protest season's coming up. Did you guys get your tax bill? Or, sitting around Sunday dinner and, talk about it, have the conversation about it, because you don't want to, come to find out, grandma hadn't paid her taxes in the last 10 years because, her pride wouldn't allow her to tell you that, she's experiencing some financial difficulties and she just didn't pay that bill. And now everybody's scrambling to try to save the house because, property tax bill is now due after she's passed away. So definitely have those conversations too. Or just look up the tax bill, make sure, it's there, it's available. Go online and go check to see if Granny paid her taxes this year. Instead of getting her a Christmas gift, everybody chip in and, pay the property taxes for her, something like that, whatever. But have the conversation. That's all I said that to say. But I believe that is it. We don't have any other questions in the chat here. And I don't have any other ones that were emailed to me, and I hope I didn't skip over anybody's question.
I had an individual message from someone who, I'm not sure they're even online anymore, but someone who missed the first part of the presentation and was asking if they could get access to it. And so
I got that email too. So we will be sending out the recording for everyone to go back to watch. The links to all the different resources, the different sites and things like that you all had mentioned will all be included in the email that actually goes out. The slides themselves, we do not distribute copies of the actual slides. You're very welcome. The actual slides themselves, we do not, but the recording will go out. You can also catch go to the Amos Houston YouTube channel. All of the recordings are done live there and are also available there in the event you don't want to wait for the Zoom link or whatever to be emailed out to you. But all of our recordings are on our YouTube channel as well. So you'd be more than happy to go out there and go watch there or share it with somebody. I know that there's somebody that you guys may know that can find this, that that finds this information to be beneficial. So we do ask that you share it, pay it forward to somebody else, whether it's a coworker, neighbor, parents, grandparents, whomever. Share the information, get it out to as many people as you possibly can, and don't allow them to continue to get misinformation or misleading information or wrong information from the street committee out there that's trying to tell them, what it is that, their interpretation of things that, that doesn't necessarily apply to you. So please do that. Also, if anyone may be experiencing property tax foreclosure or in jeopardy of losing their property due to unpaid taxes, we are having our property tax foreclosure presentation scheduled for tomorrow at 1 p.m. With the attorneys from Lone Star Legal Aid, along with the Harris County Attorney's Office, who's going to be kind of reviewing that process to let you know what happens when that tax bill becomes due and nobody's paid. What happens once it goes to the attorney's office and that collection process, and what your rights are and the remedy and the whole court proceedings and things like that you would have to go through for foreclosure to take place, and how could you potentially save your home. So definitely tune in for that presentation tomorrow. That's going to be another great segue of information. We'll kind of go over a little bit, kind of just an overview of some of the information that was talked about here today as far as the actual tax bill itself. But we'll definitely get into that whole process about foreclosure and the prevention methods that can be done. So just go back to the website at nrcdc.org and register for the property tax foreclosure presentation for tomorrow. In addition to that, next month we also have another transfer on death deed clinic that's coming up on May the 13th. I'll be sharing that information out with you guys too, and that's a great alternative to make sure that your heirs receive the property, your property in the event of your passing, that it goes to whomever it is that you want it to go to. It's a very, very good, cost-effective way to help with property preservation and maintaining that generational wealth. So please feel free to tune in. Actually, to attend, that would be an in-person session only. We will have the opportunity for folks to speak with attorneys, to have them review those documents, to have them notarized. And for those that income qualify, we will also be paying for the filing fees for the properties that are located in Harris, Fort Bend, Brazoria, and Montgomery counties only. A lot of those other smaller counties don't do electronic filing, so you would have to physically take the form to those counties themselves or mail it in directly to get that taken care of. But again, I'll send out the information about that. If there are any presentations that we don't currently offer that you guys need more information about or want to receive more resources about, please fill out the link that pops up on the screen following this session and kind of give us your feedback, give us your input. Let us know if this information was beneficial to you, if it was helpful, just kind of let us know how we did. So we're here to make sure that we get you guys the information that's relevant to you, that you're interested in and that you need to hear. So reach out to us and let us know. We thank y'all very much. Miss Sarah, Miss Tawana, Miss Shay, thank y'all very much. And also to the other staff members from HCAD, Joseph and Jamie, who were assisting with, was that right? Was that Joseph and Jamie?
Yes.
Okay, who were assisting with answering the questions in the chat. And again, I hope we did go over everything for you guys. If there were any questions that I did miss, please feel free to email me and I'll make sure that it gets to the tax office or the appraisal district so that your questions can get addressed. But in the meantime, you all have a wonderful remainder of your day. Thank you guys for attending, and we will talk to you all soon. Stay safe and take care of yourself. We'll see y'all next time.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.